maybe not so much in the Western world, but at least in other parts of the world, like communities and things happen around the table and around food, and the way that impacts culture and impacts relationships is just a huge part of what interests me about food.
Welcome to More Than Profit, the podcast where values, vision, and capital converge. Produced by Access Ventures, this show spotlights the leaders and innovators redefining success, not just through financial returns, but by the impact they create. Every episode dives into the inspiring stories, bold ideas, and hard-won lessons of those who are leveraging capital, financial, intellectual, and social, for equity, sustainability, and systematic change. Whether you're an investor, entrepreneur, or purpose-driven professional, we are here to challenge the status quo, push the boundaries of traditional investing, and inspire you to align your resources with your values. Join us as we explore how capital can be a force for meaningful change.
Hey everyone, welcome back to More Than Profit. I'm Bryce Butler, and I'm here with my co-host for this month, Brian MacKay. Today, we've got a special guest, Sujeen Park. She's a grad student at MIT who just happens to be one of our Access Ventures fellows from this past year. More than that, she's also quite literally been getting her hands dirty in sustainable food systems and regenerative agriculture while getting her MBA. But here's the interesting thing. Sujeen didn't start in food at all. In fact, she started off with an undergrad in math and then spent several years in finance, consulting, and tech, helping businesses navigate digital transformation. But along the way, she started asking some big questions like, how do we build food systems that are not just profitable, but also sustainable and equitable? How can business be a force for good, not just growth? And those questions led her down a whole new path, one that's taken her from urban gardens and food justice initiatives to farming in Hawaii. So if you care about food, sustainability, and how the next generation of leaders is shaping impact-driven business, this episode is for you.
So, hey, Bryce, today's guest is at a school. If you could go to any school in the country, what school would that be?
Harvard.
Exactly. That would be mine too, actually. But no, this is MIT. So we have Sujeen with us today from MIT, and we're going to tell a little bit of her story and background and stuff. So it's going to be an incredible opportunity to meet a person doing amazing things. And she is at an amazing school. I like to tease her, but MIT, I would say, is probably, I would even say it's over Harvard, but that's just me. So I don't know if Bryce doesn't probably share that. So yeah.
No, it's a fantastic school. So
will you introduce our guest today?
So the great thing is Sujeen, we've gotten to know her over the last 9 months. She's one of our inaugural Access Ventures fellows, and it's been a joy to get to know her. She is at MIT. We're kind of joking, but really she is very smart and getting a grad degree from there. And so she's really fascinating, her background. And so Sujeen, I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but you're at MIT in a grad program, but you're really passionate about regenerative agriculture and sustainable food systems, which is not how you got started. So give us a little backstory about what you've actually been doing in your career for the last 5-6 years and kind of now what you're hoping to shift into.
And back it up even just so the listeners can hear. So where are you from? Just give like quick background of just a little history of yourself and then jump into the 5-6 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it is certainly has been a journey. I was born in Korea, but I did grow up moving around quite a bit. I went to college in Indiana, Notre Dame, and then stayed in Chicago for those 5-6 years of my career before moving to Boston for grad school. And I will say that, yeah, I'm branded as a food and agriculture person or the sustainable food systems person at school, even now amongst my peers. But it's interesting when you look at my resume how recent that development is. So prior to school, I spent the last 5 years in consulting, various consulting roles. I studied math in undergrad and then went into kind of a programming and digital innovation function, and then kind of became more client-facing, people-facing, and then started to do consulting and automation projects, kind of really being that middleman person helping companies in their digital transformation. But that time was really a period for me to figure out what my calling was and where my passions were, because I was being exposed to all these businesses, all these people, businesses at different scales, businesses in different industries, and that exposure was really helpful. And I was kind of using all of that to calibrate okay, what am I good at? What do I love? And what can I actually do? And so I was checking, okay, how am I spending my free time? It's like community gardens and urban agriculture and reading books on food politics and the broken food system. What am I good at and what my career speaks to is like people, relationships, like client facing, like managing multiple projects at once. And like, yeah, that like business acumen, which I guess led me to the MBA where it keeps things pretty open. It's like a general management degree. But over that time, I was feeling and finding that business is the most powerful force in society.
And what do you mean?
Fortunately,
What
I
do you
guess
mean by that? Like when you say that, why
yeah,
why did you see that?
I think I was noticing that it wasn't religion, it wasn't politics that like got things to move in a very like practical way and scalable way in society. I started an educational nonprofit in 2019 right out of college, and it's a little bit of the reason I'm allergic to nonprofit now, but the things that you can do in like business organizations and like that structure to make like impact at scale, you do need to be profitable. You do need this momentum, like financial momentum. I decided that the MBA was going to be the most impactful way to do that.
Are you almost done with the program now?
Yes, so I graduate in about 2 months.
Well, so let me ask you this question. So you are math is one of your strong suits. Is that right?
Was maybe we can.
But it is interesting going, you are a numbers person, you like
Yeah.
numbers. You are also very social because I've watched you now in, different circumstances and you do love people. You love interacting in that. And so I do think that is a great combination of loving numbers, but also loving people.
Yeah, I think that I mean, that's also the food industry, right? Like food and beverage is just it's everybody eats everywhere every single day. It's so applicable. Maybe not so much in the Western world, but at least in other parts of the world, like communities and things happen around the table and around food and the way that that impacts culture and impacts relationships is just a huge part of what interests me about food. And I say this as like somebody who worked in finance, somebody who worked in marketing, somebody who worked in a tuberculosis research lab. And I feel like the food industry for me is it's just like the industry that keeps giving. I'm like, you should be in food. You should be in food.
Mm.
Because we have, yeah, the public health and nutrition aspect of it. We have how it impacts like community I guess, like, it impacts city planning and transportation. In the US, we have, the agrarian history and its ties to slavery and the systemic racism. We have just, like, the cultural, social component of it. Like, everyone eats, but everyone eats very differently. And respecting, like, cultural traditions in food, like, what is available to different communities and what are people going to choose to eat, how people make decisions around what you eat. It's all just, like it just keeps me intellectually entertained, and it's difficult, it's challenging, it's like a problem at scale, so, yeah, so I just feel like it in that way, it's the industry that keeps giving. Meanwhile, I've jumped around all these places.
When I was going to ask, I think sometimes when you go to grad school and you're passionate, you kind of leave and you're maybe not as passionate. But it seems like being at MIT, and through some of your studies and experiences, it's actually deepened or even expand. How has your perspective or kind of what you think you might want to focus on, how has that changed over the last couple of years in grad school and kind of in some of the experiences you've had?
Yeah, so the good thing about MIT that I do think is different from other programs a little bit is they're really like, here's 2 years to play. Like, this is a playground, go play. The way that they ask, like, the application too, I think, like, Harvard has this, like, giant essay and this, like, intense interview, and, like, it's about, like, the future, whereas MIT is like, show us that you've been competent and a curious, engaged person in the past, and we're gonna use that to inform because it doesn't like, the future is a question mark, but we just wanna know that you have the skills to kinda to play and to play appropriately, and then the way that the curriculum is designed is, like, we have, like, a 2-month, kind of, like, way too long winter holiday, but it's really an independent activities period where they're like, "Go start a company, go do something," and that's, like, built into our curriculum, and so for me, I was like, "Well, I'm a food person, and I've never been a farmer, so let me go be a farmer," and I went and became an organic regenerative farmer for a couple of months because I felt like we have this disconnect in the food system where executives in food and bev are making all these decisions and they've never been on the ground. And that's
And
probably true of every industry, but
and where did you go and do this farming at?
Hawaii.
Okay.
It,
Just want to make sure.
It's not a bad
was-
place to choose.
Yeah.
it was a place that had to be productive during the time and was in active growing season during the time that I had winter break. So honestly, Hawaii wasn't my first choice, but I realized I had to narrow down places that were actually growing during this time. So that was the best choice for me.
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't want to sideline this very long, but we have a lot of listeners who are either young, like so you're under 30, and then we have a lot of older listeners that have kids that are in your age group. So what advice would you give to a young professional? Because I just go, you walked away from a very lucrative business to go back to school, and well, no, but I only say that going, I commend you for it. I really do going. You're young enough and you have time. And I just go, you needed to explore this area. And I think it's really been fascinating watching you go through it. What advice?
I mean, the only thing that is going to allow you to say no to a very lucrative and stable career is like the inner conviction. And of course, the verbal affirmation helps. Like, I've been really grateful and lucky to have people like Brian and Bryce and Access Ventures invest and like validate the fact that this is the right thing and this is a good thing and we're supporting you. And like likewise, like even at school, there are people who are like, hey, like I'm running around recruiting for PM or investment banking, but like, how are you not distracted? Like I get so distracted by the money or the potential. Like you can do it too. Like why are you not recruiting? Everyone else is recruiting right now. And I'm like, well, because I know what I want to do and it's important. And I know it's important because the work that I've done thus far is real and it's validating to me and it's rewarding. And I think like that seeing the way that affects people in my program who, yeah, everybody's an MBA, everyone's an MIT, but seeing the way that groundedness affects people. And yeah, that's been really encouraging as well. But I do think the inner conviction ultimately, it comes from like being honest with yourself. I think I had to do some work. And that was honestly, yeah, 5 years in consulting for me to figure out that was my calling and that's something I was good at and could do, just taking the time to sit with that.
That's
But it
good.
all comes into place. I feel like it didn't even come to me, it didn't fully weave into a story for me until I was sitting down and doing my applications because I was like, I was just going to take those couple of years to be honest with myself and spend time and energy where I wanted to, read the books what I wanted to, like participate and volunteer where I wanted to. And then thinking back when you have to put together a resume or think back at how you've spent that time, there is a story there. But just like do what you want, especially if you're young, like do what you want, like go volunteer somewhere, go like make minimum wage somewhere, and the story will come if you're honest with yourself.
That's good.
That's good.
Wow.
So for some of our listeners too, because then I think it's really interesting, agriculture right now, or food, I should say food, is pretty hot in the news media, right? I mean, through the election cycle, we've got a new cabinet secretary for health and family services, and a lot of conversation around just how it affects the human body. Food is medicine. So there's a lot of these buzzwords, and a lot of people don't even understand it. When they think agriculture, they're like, oh, corn is grown, in the Midwest and goes into a lot of our food. Help our listeners understand what do you mean by regenerative farming? Like, why is that an important thing to think about? Why is there a renewed focus on how we source food and why that matters for Americans and people around the world? Why is it so important?
Yeah, I have seen that kind of pattern. There are a lot of people starting to be interested in the space. I mean, essentially, we have this disconnect from our food. Like when we say it's a struggle right now to make farming or agriculture or the farm bill relevant to people. People say like the farm bill actually should be renamed to the food bill, because actually 80% of the funds that are affected by the farm bill is SNAP and Social Security related benefits and WIC, and people are divorced from their food. So when they hear farm bill, it's so irrelevant to this society that is no longer dependent on an agrarian economy. Yeah, the same thing when they hear agriculture. Maybe like we have some farm to table restaurants and they have little touch points with the word farm and agriculture. But I think now there is this movement. We see it affecting our health. We see that cancer rates are crazy and like never before. And the new face of cancer are young 30-year-olds who work in tech. Like it's not 80-year-olds or people who are lifelong smokers. So people are questioning, like it's affecting our health, if it's affecting our families, it's affecting our relationships. Let's look into like what we put in our bodies, which is super interesting because that's a really intimate thing and requires trust, therefore. And we're looking to the places, the institutions that control what we eat. The trust is broken when we lift the curtain and, I don't know, see how the sausage is made, I guess. So I think there's a movement for people to understand that and kind of regain agency over their health and their choices, because what's even available to us isn't. But sorry, to answer the regenerative part, I would say it's interesting. Regenerative isn't officially federally defined. Neither is the word sustainable, which is why we see such greenwashing and marketing being an issue. But I would say my understanding of regenerative and the one that I would like to push forward is the idea that traditional farming is carbon positive, right? It generates carbon, it's bad for the environment, and it's just about production and volume, yields, whereas regenerative farming is an alternative approach that is carbon negative. So some people have their definition of carbon neutral. I would say it's carbon negative, that there's a way to farm, there's a way to eat, there's a way to produce and supply in such a way that is regenerative for the world. Chef Dan Barber, who runs Stone Barn or Blue Hill in New York, he always talks about visiting, there's like a foie gras farmer. And you think foie gras is so anti-environment, so anti like food and sustainability people. In Spain, there's a foie gras farmer who basically he doesn't force feed. He makes his farm just such a paradise that these geese are gorging themselves because they're just so happy. It's like a spa 24/7. And he's never replaced his flock because every year there's a flock that migrates north past Spain and they just settle there because they're just like, what is this place? And so he has wild geese and that's like increasing his flock. So he's like invested in creating this paradise, which is just so in line with the environment and what is good for the world. It's also super profitable because he's never buying new flock or having to invest in machines that force feed geese.
That's interesting.
That's carbon negative.
I had actually never heard of even just rebranding, renaming, rethinking the farm bill to the food bill, but it does make sense because I've experienced, and I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, and I've done some projects around agriculture. Obviously, we're an agrarian state. We still have 80,000 small shareholder farms in the state of Kentucky. So there's always this push, how do we make small farmers successful so that we can keep that kind of traditional heritage? But when you talk to people, even as I work with the governor's office, a lot of times the things they think about is like, how do we make the farmer more successful? And they jump to like more of like precision farming or ag tech. Like, how do we actually resource the farmer to be more efficient and productive? But I think if we actually reframe it more from a farming ag conversation into a food conversation, there's a lot that we have regionally that I'm like, man, what have we actually talked about? The supply chain, like the food system, from food production, food storage, food distribution, food waste. There's a value chain of food that I think regions like Kentucky actually win in when you think about transportation and logistics as a massive part of the food infrastructure. I think I like that idea of kind of reframing it around food, that something is relatable to every person because we're not connected to the fields like we used to be.
It's a systemic issue. I think it is important to recognize like interventions in very specific things like increasing yield and ag tech for farmers. But farmers are only farming if they have demand for food or if the logistics and infrastructure is set up for them to be able to sell and have a business. And so just zooming out and recognizing that it's all part of a system.
What does it take to turn an idea into a thriving business? For many entrepreneurs, the hardest hurdle is securing their first dollar of funding, a crucial milestone that can make or break a venture. That's where Access Ventures' groundbreaking First Dollar program comes in. Over the past 4 years, this program has been more than just a funding initiative. It's been a catalyst for change. By providing entrepreneurs with the capital they need to get started, it's enabled dozens of startups to cross the critical threshold from concept to execution. Now, Access Ventures is sharing the lessons learned in an in-depth case study that examines the program's impact and highlights the strategies that worked and challenges that remain. If you're an entrepreneur, investor, or changemaker interested in how target funding can drive economic growth and equity, this is a must-read. Explore the real-world successes, hear the stories of founders who've benefited, and discover insights that could transform the way we think about the early-stage funding. Visit accessventures.org to dive into the First Dollar case study and see how Access Ventures is reshaping what it means to empower entrepreneurs. Don't miss this chance to learn from projects that's redefining access to capital. Check it out today.
You're in grad school, you're looking at kind of more the business side of it, and you're passionate about like, how do we make sustainable systems? What do you say, because I get this a lot too, what do you say to the person that says, well, that's a very privileged existence? Like the average person, especially right now when you go to the grocery store and you're saying, seeing regular eggs for $6 a dozen in Kentucky, and I think I saw in Chicago, they're almost $1 an egg. What do you say around kind of just, is there an inherent higher cost? How do we reframe or rethink the economics around food in order to make it more palatable, if you will, to the everyday person? Because I hear a lot of elite people talking about sustainable agriculture, and there's more of a position like, and then I have friends on the other side like, yeah, I wish I could think like you or purchase like you, but I have, 3 kids at home and they eat a lot of food. I can't be buying that locally sourced. I'd love to, I just can't afford it. How do we reconcile those things, and how do we think about that from a business perspective? Have you seen anything in the work that you're doing to reframe the economics of this, or how do we tackle that bit?
I think part of it is very true. It's very real depending on your location, what's accessible to you, that it's only a feasible lifestyle if you are at a certain social economic class to make individual decisions that way. The other part of it, though, is that things have changed and become more accessible, yet like the price perception of making positive choices is a very sticky perception. And people are reluctant to change. And that's also part of it. But of course, the flip side of like, that's what we're trying to address is people don't always have the choice. Like there has been systemic racism built into our infrastructure and our transportation systems. Low access isn't just about physical proximity or economic proximity. It's about ability, physical ability, time. And unfortunately, like that's also why we have to look at it from, I think, like a business perspective and at a corporate level, because there's
a couple things like
side helps. Yeah.
There's a guy that been around in the past, is Sir Patrick Holden, and he talks about this idea of the true cost accounting of food. And he's, because there's so many subsidies that are priced in to the cost of food. And so if we actually like give the consumer like the true cost, both from an environmental perspective and then also an economic perspective, all these subsidies that are just factored into the cost of food, that would it actually make it more price comparable? So when you're at the grocery store and you're like, oh my gosh, that $8 dozen organic eggs versus the $6 regular, it's really not that price differential because of all of these subsidies that are just kind of baked into the systems. There's that side. And then what I think, and I don't know if you have any comments on that, but the other side that I get really excited about is this kind of food as medicine direction. Because when you think about, to your point on access and infrastructure, who is the appropriate payer? And because we have such a high cost of healthcare, is there another alternative for how we think about access to higher quality food just because it's better for us? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on either path, but those are really interesting, I think, as we think about kind of the future of food in America.
Yeah, food as medicine is super interesting, especially as we see more and more research coming up about its actual effects and impacts and ability to heal people outside of the traditional medical care system. I actually, when we went to in January to Ceres Food Project to visit Catherine Couch and her organization, it was awesome. We volunteered there. We got to eat there. The food is really good. And after the trek, when I went to visit a friend who lives in the Bay, who was just diagnosed with having like different ulcers and like pre-cancer things in her breasts and her stomach, she had never even heard about this. And this girl is like, she had a master's at Carnegie Mellon. She's working at Google, like very educated, and still had never made the connection that food and what you eat is like affecting your health and could. And she actually like signed up to get meal deliveries from Ceres, which is a nonprofit and serves the local community of like low income people. But she's like, I'm going to pay whatever it takes to like get this food. But yeah, I do think food as medicine is very exciting. It is definitely a big problem though, like who is paying for it and like how do we charge it through the system and how that works, because the biggest momentum that we get with food as medicine is when you integrate it fully within the healthcare system and insurance pathway. And when physicians are familiar with that language and can bill like that and can prescribe like a traditional pharmacy, like here's your grocery prescription, here's your fresh produce prescription, here's your food as medicine, like medically supported meal prescription, and like that feed through the insurance system the same way it does now. That's how we're seeing the most traction occur. The problem is like the healthcare system is broken. So we're putting a broken food system and integrating it with a broken healthcare system that's by nature going to exclude the same people who is excluded by the healthcare system. And so the people who need it most are almost falling through again. But is it worth it to like pursue the momentum of food as medicine and expand its reach? Probably yes, but that can't be the end all be all.
So this is something you could solve for us, please, Sujin.
It's a good postgraduate opportunity right there for you. Well, Sujin, one of the things that I think I've known each other for the last, 7-8 months or so. I know Brian always teases you when we're together that you're this really smart person and you look down at us, but it's not true. I've always appreciated you coming.
It's kind of true.
I've always appreciated you coming with just a humility and a teachability and a desire to learn. You always ask really good questions. And I think it's actually, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's born out of your kind of side interest or your passion for helping inspire next gen leaders. And, I've kind of seen that even in some of the work that you've done. So help me, how can we, and maybe you've thought about this a little bit, I don't know, but what's a way that we can get young people, or what are ways you've seen young people get more passionate about business and sustainability, food? Because I do think, to your point, these are big problems that are probably going to be here for the next generation. We need to get them interested in them. How do we do that? How do we inspire them to kind of step into this?
I would love to have I think it's hands-on, especially with food. The food world, food is so sensual. There is something that is tangible about it. You need to see it, you need to smell it, you need to touch it, you need to be around it. And similarly, I don't know if this is going to make sense, but I think business is very similar, where business is just relationships and it's people building each other up, and through building each other up, like building something and creating something. And so I see those two things as very compatible in that way. I would love to have I say I'm allergic to nonprofit, but yeah, it's important to me to empower people. And I would love to have a program to get people to have hands-on mini projects, design with them something that empowers them, and they can see that they are capable of making, you guys use the phrase moving the needle a bit. And when you see that and when you feel that, I feel like that just is momentum in the right direction.
That's good.
Actually good.
Yeah.
So as you think about
to do have teaching kitchens, or I don't know, people, Alice Waters, they talk about the edible education, and that is with a younger demographic, but it's just so incredible to me, the generational impacts of that. You're going to start a little kitchen and a little garden, but from that, people have something that's going to get them out of gang violence, and that actually excites them. They feel like they can be healthy. They feel like they can serve others. They feel like they're making themselves and other people better. They feel like they can be creative and cook. They feel like they can have a career. Things just open up. And I love that. I love the fact that you're empowering someone in a way that's like very close to something. It's accessible and it's very close to like humanity. I'm obviously biased, but I just think like business and food, that's everything. That's life.
No, I like that idea. I think you're exactly right. I think anytime you can make it tactile, tangible, relational, it does impact people in different ways. It's not a course that you just sit in front of your computer and watch it online and check the box. It's like it's really I think to move people's heartstrings in that direction. It's an experiential thing. So I like that. What's next? I mean, you're facing graduation and here in a couple months or so. What are you thinking about beyond MIT?
You're going back to consulting, aren't you?
No shame in that game. No shame.
Definitely not, actually. Thankfully, because of my team, my consulting team, who all really believe in me and let me go knowing that I'm going to make a difference in the world of food systems. So I definitely cannot go back to them because they would be disappointed. I am exploring a few things. I decided not to go back to the company I interned at this summer, which was a large packaged goods company, food conglomerate, because I think I'm being a little bit more picky. Yeah, my thesis for the summer was just let me see who are the players in food and what are the dynamics. How do you get a product to market? Just the overall value chain of food and understanding that, which was accomplished and I'm very grateful for. And working for a big company that has everything, it's just like a well-oiled machine. I was able to like see that and learn from it. But I don't think at the end of the day, when I think about public health and when I think about bringing up communities through food establishments and making more healthy and sustainable communities, that felt a little bit further off. So I think big food, I have turned away from that because I think that I have gotten what I need from there. And I am looking to do a little bit, something a little bit more pointy in the social impact space. So no jobs yet, but I'm very excited about a few companies and also looking at doing some ventures myself and projects. So we shall see.
Cool.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Well, we hope to have you back on again once you land wherever you land. That would be awesome. Yeah, well, especially if you make it big, then we'll for sure be following up with you.
Yeah. Well, I got one last question. I'm curious because I'm always fascinated who inspires who, but if you could collaborate with anyone, so like you're working with them, you're collaborating, if you could collaborate with anybody, whether that's business, policy, or whatever, in the kind of that help transform food systems, who would it be and why?
Yeah. I mean, okay, well, I've mentioned both in kind of different spheres. Alice Waters, who was, and they're both similar, Alice Waters and Dan Barber. And I think the reason is they're both really focused on flavor, which is essentially flavor is king in food. And you need to get that right to open up and like engage with everything else and scale. And true flavor comes from a really clean supply chain with a lot of integrity. And they've discovered that and they're pushing that. And if you're cooking and being creative with it, you've created a market for it, a demand from it. And that value chain, I think, is extremely valuable. So I think both of them they have taught me, but I have learned from stalking them that that's really important and that's really powerful. So Dan Barber, for instance, he started a company called Row 7. So he's a chef and he runs his restaurants, but he also started a company and it's a seed company. It started as a seed company for all these fruits and veggies that were really good that breeders were breeding, but only planting in their backyard and not selling because it was delicious, but it wasn't going to survive our modern distribution chain. It wasn't bred to survive like miles and miles of transportation and like have a super long shelf life. It was bred for flavor. So it's mushy and weak and delicious and beautiful, but it's not gonna survive. So it's not gonna sell. So he was like, wait, chefs want this. Like, we want really good food. Flavor is king, color is nutrition. And started to like buy these seeds and create a marketplace for them, connected with his other famous chef friends and other breeders and scientists. And now, I mean, I'm a fan of the market, obviously, but creating a marketplace has not only brought like economic empowerment to these communities and these people who are growing, but like changing the system, like being like, F the distribution that is screwing everybody's health. Why are we creating food and breeding food to survive the distribution chain? We should be creating food for people. So
That's awesome.
that's one that I'm excited about. I already
That's
got
really
them to
cool.
hire me. They said no. they said not yet. We'll
Not
keep
yet.
you in mind.
I just love the fact that you asked. I think that's awesome.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
So
You've
actually,
already
the
done
MIT
that,
garden,
so-
I bought all row 7 seeds. And
There you
now
go.
they've reached out to do an article. And I was like, well, you could do an article if you hire me.
Yeah. I like that. How do we bottle that up and distribute that? I've got 4 daughters. I would love to give that passion energy to. Like, come on, let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I need to meet them.
yeah, you do. Well, thanks so much. Brian, any parting thoughts, questions?
Well, no, Sujeen, you are an inspiration. So thank you for both participating and then also just being on the show, because it's just that fun thing. It gives me hope in people again, because I look at it going, the world is a hard place. And, and part of our joy of working with younger people is how idealistic you are. But you're old enough to know.
That is not true. Honestly, I feel like with Access Ventures, this is like the one thing that really drew me was I realized that Access Ventures was very similar to me in that we all share this like fundamental optimism about what people and businesses can do for change at scale.
Agreed.
And I think that was like so surprising to me. I was like, these people believe, like they're doing it. They're moving money for good. They're making money for good. Like to do that, you need to be profitable, to be sustainable. Like it's all these things you guys already know. But I feel like we share that.
We do.
Yeah.
That was a great conversation. Sujeen has such a unique perspective on the future of food, how business, sustainability, and community all intersect. One of the biggest takeaways for me is that real change in food isn't just about better farming, it's about rethinking the entire system. From supply chains to policy to accessibility, there's so much opportunity to make a real difference. Today's episode of More Than Profit was hosted by me, Bryce Butler, and my friend Brian MacKay. Our executive producer is Crystal Esquivel, and our associate producers are Bryn MacKay and Bailey Pendleton. Graphics design is by Justin Esquivel, and audio production assistance is provided by Resonate Recording. Today's theme music is Bonfire by As Tall as Pine and Better Start Now by Kid Penny.
Thanks for tuning in to More Than Profit, a podcast produced by Access Ventures. We hope today's conversation inspired you to think differently about how values, vision, and capital can create meaningful change. To stay up to date, make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. While you're there, we'd love if you left a review to help others find the show. Visit us at www.accessventures.org/podcast for additional content and past episodes. You can also join the conversation by following us on Twitter at ACS Ventures. I'm Bryn MacKay, and you've been listening to More Than Profit, a production of Access Ventures. See you next time.